Aloha, welcome to Healthcare in Hawaii. I'm your host, Josh Green. I serve as Senator for Big Island, Kona side. I'm also a physician. And today I'm going to talk with a good friend, Jeff Mikulina, who's the CEO of Blue Planet Foundation. He's going to tell us about the organization, but just let me say this. Jeff is a constant fixture at the state capitol. He's a super advocate for renewable energy, for environmental protection, for good policy, and really best practices in our state that might reflect what other states or other nations are doing. So today I thought, instead of doing our traditional show where we talked exclusively about healthcare matters, we would integrate positive comments and interesting ideas on the environmental health side, conservation side, and what Blue Planet does. Good to see you again.
Great, thanks, Senator.
You bet, great to see you, buddy. So Jeff, let's dive in. You are an environmental health leader. You went to University of Illinois, you were an engineer there.
That's right.
You've got a band called Jive Nene with Mark Lick, who's a very good dude in energy policy here too. Yep. But you're a leader at Blue Planet Foundation. Could you start by telling us a little bit, for those who might not know, what Blue Planet does?
Sure, thanks. And you mentioned leader, but this doesn't happen without a great staff that we have over there, and then the vision of our founder, Mr. Hank Rogers,
yes.
Who founded the organization about 8 years ago. The mission is to end the use of fossil fuel on Earth.
Interesting.
We envision a world of energy abundance powered by renewable sources. But specifically in Hawaii, we really see Hawaii as this opportunity to clear the path for 100% renewable energy and demonstrate what that looks like for other islands, for other nations. And as you mentioned, best practices and policies.
Right.
This is a perfect laboratory for that sort of thing for renewable energy. So that's what Blue Planet's working on, either policies or programs that we can implement,
yes.
Or initiatives that get people to think different about energy and their use and their role in climate, really.
It's pretty exciting because I think it's exciting to hear you say it so directly about using the benefits we have in Hawaii as being, a laboratory for what could be done elsewhere. Because I think that comes up a lot, whether it's in the business communities or in health sectors. I hear it all the time. If we can do it in Hawaii, we can, then demonstrate it can be done in a relatively closed system, and people can learn from what we've done here. Is that what happens for you? I mean, do you guys look at running like test bed ideas, and then do people reach out to you from across the country to say, hey, how did that go?
In some ways, yes. And I think that the signature policy that you passed last year was the 100% renewable energy requirement for Hawaii, the first state in the nation with such a mandate.
Yes.
I just got back from a conference in Texas where they invited us to come and speak on Hawaii's initiative, how we got it in place, what's the plan to achieve 100%. But since that measure passed, the conversation has changed. I mean, a number of things have affected it.
Tell me.
Obviously, last year the Pope came out, strong commentary on climate and how we need to act on climate, which is, I think, took a lot of people by surprise, but was very welcome.
Yes.
And obviously the Paris negotiations around climate change and the outcome, which was 190 countries essentially agreeing to take action on climate.
Right.
So you think of Hawaii, and we're a small bit player in the middle of the Pacific,
right.
But at the same time, when Hawaii commits in law with penalties to 100% renewable energy, people take notice. I mean, the President Obama tweeted that day about his home state, taking a leadership stance.
I had no idea, and that really underscores exactly what the hope would be, right? If Blue Planet and you and Hank and the team can lead in a way. I mean, I wasn't aware that the president tweeted that, and
to be fair, it probably wasn't the president. It was probably his assistant social media intern. That's
okay. We know the president has us in mind, but the idea that the Pope is talking about this, or that the president's talking about this, or that Texas, which probably, for argument's sake, has the most reliance on oil. I mean, their economy is based on pumping oil out of the ground, right? The fact that they're having you at a conference to talk about what Hawaii is doing is really encouraging to me. Tell me, let's go back a step. Tell me about ending the use of fossil fuels. Is it possible? What will it take? What's the universe like on this?
So first of all, of course it's possible. It's not only possible, it's a moral imperative. I mean, if we hope to have a globe that resembles the one that we grew up on,
right.
Hope to have a stable economy, hope to have an ecosystem that can support the food that we eat, we need to shift away in short order from fossil fuel to renewable sources.
Okay.
The good news is we can do that without, we're accustomed to a certain way of life. A lot of that has been supported by pulling up carbon-based fuels out of the Earth's crust and
right.
putting the products of combustion into the atmosphere. we can stop doing that and maintain the progress that we've had, the civilization that we built on fossil fuel.
Right.
Technology has evolved so much. We can make this shift, and again, there's no place better than Hawaii to do it. We have every resource at our disposal. We know we have the solar every day, we have great wind resources, we have wave resources, biofuels, geothermal.
Right.
You name it, we have it in Hawaii. It's almost like the reverse Frank Sinatra effect. If we can't do it here, we can't do it anywhere. You know?
Funny, yes.
And yet we pay so much for energy because we bring it all in. We don't have any indigenous fossil fuel in Hawaii, which is a good thing.
Right.
So we can demonstrate what this looks like.
Right, so we really do have a true controlled situation. Since we bring it all in, everything we get off of has the effect of being purely demonstrated possibility. And it's far to bring fuels here too, so there's
expensive.
a big benefit. Yeah. So tell me this, well, I guess when you say that the Pope and the President and Blue Planet are talking about it, you're talking about it not just because it would be good to decrease pollution and affect the ozone, but you're talking about it in terms of other things like what's the impact of having global warming, the impact on health, the impact on cultures. I know you've spoken very eloquently about that, and we've had some people on the show worried that the Marshall Islands, could disappear, that other cultures could be devastated. We talk about, we're seeing more infections that are borne by vectors like mosquitoes. It's been constantly in the press, and probably that's somehow connected to climate change and how, they're able to propagate. How does this factor into your day-to-day life? I mean, all of these issues. Do you just focus on energy, or are you into all these issues?
Well, you pull the thread one place and you find out it's connected to everything else.
Right.
So we do have a narrow focus on ending fossil fuel.
Yes.
That can be considered narrow.
Yeah.
But everything you mentioned, those are all the ancillary benefits of us shifting away from carbon.
Yes.
So some people say, hey, look at the job growth. How many jobs are in solar energy in Hawaii? That's exciting.
Yes.
The technology growth. Folks like the Energy Accelerator, they're incubating companies here.
Right.
But really, when you look at, I mentioned moral imperative,
Yeah.
but from the health impacts to the rising sea levels to climate change and the vectors, as you mentioned, this is really the challenge of our generation.
Yeah.
And as soon as you peek under the hood and see what's going on, we need to move quick. Everything from you read about these earthquakes in Oklahoma, and you think, oh, what does this have to do with anything?
Yeah.
But they're fracking for this natural gas, and the earthquakes don't happen in Oklahoma, but they have them almost every day now because we want to pull up this low-cost gas so we can find a new fossil fuel to run our power plants on.
Right.
Whereas we can shift quickly to clean energy sources, show that we don't need fuel. We know what the price is into the future because it's going to be the same.
Right.
And then again, demonstrate what all of this looks like together.
It's really so fascinating. You're taking on the biggest challenge, like you said, of our time, which one of the reasons I like you and I like what Blue Planet does is it really distills some of our most essential needs to think about the future, because there is no future if we have some catastrophic change.
Right.
Can you talk to me a little bit about global warming?
Sure.
You're an expert, so where have we been? Where are we going if we continue with fossil fuel use like we have? And tell me what the impact of changing that trajectory will be.
So I'm an optimist. So I think you'll talk to some folks and say, these scales are tipping.
Yes.
As we release carbon dioxide from burning fossil fuel, from our cars, from our power plants, methane leaks from all sorts of things.
Right.
It kind of creates a blanket around the Earth that's trapping the infrared radiation that bounces off the Earth's surface. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing warming. We're also seeing a buildup of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. This is, looking at Hawaii also as a leader. The science happens in Hawaii. It happens on your island,
yes.
On top of Mauna Loa. There's a small lab, and since 1957, they take a sample of air every 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. They send it off to Scripps, and they measure the concentration of carbon dioxide.
Yes.
And they've noticed that slowly, ticking upwards. Now it passed the 400 parts per million threshold, which seems like nothing at all.
Right.
But it's just a little thing, a little switch in the, you're an ER doc, just a little switch in the system can really mess things up quickly.
Absolutely. The smallest of switches can really end you. And that's not what we want to see. Now, the climate, the conference that just occurred, what was it called again?
In the Paris?
Yes.
The official name is, unfortunately, COP21, which means Conference of Parties. And it's the 21st time they got together, which I think is notable that, wow, 21 times, and now we finally have everyone on the same page.
Right.
To get 190, 195 countries to agree on anything, I'm sure,
impossible.
can you imagine if they were ordering takeout, But they've agreed that we're going to take steps, and not only steps to limit, greenhouse gas emissions, but they're actually talking about temperatures. Is it going to be 2 degrees? Is it going to be 1.5 degrees? People say, well, what's the right number? What's the safe threshold? And we're in uncharted territory. We don't know. I mean, there's a lot of levers that could flip really quickly. Melting of the West Antarctic ice sheet, melting of Greenland, and then feedbacks as you melt the permafrost up, in Canada and those Russia.
Right.
You start to release all the peat and everything that's been frozen there, and that's a whole bunch of methane, greenhouse gas that can trap even more.
So it could cycle into a kind of a bad feedback loop.
That's right. And we don't know what to do. I mean, we can't fathom, the effort it would take to unravel that.
Right.
Or to re-ravel it once it unravels.
Right. There's no going back. There's no sudden freeze for
Right.
that area. Well, what's the current wisdom? I mean, you said that the countries got together. They decided we're going to target how many degrees? What was the decision ultimately?
Well, it was 2 degrees with a target of 1.5.
Okay.
As a limit. Celsius, though.
Yes,
So.
Celsius. Okay, so more like 3 degrees Fahrenheit. So
Right.
for people out there, and what will the impact be? I mean, how many years are we giving ourselves to do this?
So that was the outcome of the conference.
Right.
Details are left for future negotiations.
Got it. So now people will work behind the scenes to make sure that we come up with some of the details on what restrictions there should be on burning fossil fuels,
That's right.
what it would be necessary from each country. Because
Right.
with 195 countries or whatever there, not just the United States, but China, India.
And all sorts of little countries that we don't often think about. And
Right.
so that's where the negotiation comes in. So I think advocates, and we were disappointed while we were encouraged that they didn't have these binding limits on these countries. It was just we'll agree and move forward.
Right.
But we thought that was the first step. I mean, you need someone to say, yes, I have a problem, before they start to lay out what's the process to get help.
Right, because it will affect everybody. I mean, it will certainly affect some more than others. People that have very small nations that don't have economies that can be sustained, I assume, island states. I mean,
Right.
what would happen to us in Hawaii if we saw large, changes in temperature? What's the prediction?
Oh, before we get there, you mentioned a good point. Fiji, interestingly enough, a couple of weeks ago, they committed to 100% renewable.
Wow.
And paying attention to the news, last weekend they got whacked by a huge hurricane, in fact, the largest in the southern hemisphere. So that's what could happen. And it's just a function of, you have more energy in the system, more energy in the atmosphere,
Right.
more heat in the ocean, and hotter sea surface temperatures just provide fodder for potentially stronger storms, heavier precipitation events. There's some good research going on at University of Hawaii, looking exactly what are the impacts on Hawaii. And, Dr. Chip Fletcher looks at the sea level rise, and some folks are saying probably maybe 3 or 4 feet before the end of this century, which would turn Waikiki into the Venice of the Pacific. Another professor, Professor Chu, was looking at precipitation events and how it's going to be heavier in some places and probably drier in others.
Right.
He looked at a Hawaii island and found that the big downpour events, the things that happen every 20 years, it was about a 12-inch downpour every 20 years,
Right.
50 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Then he looked at data from 2010, 50 years later, and found that, wow, these downpour events don't happen every 20 years, they happen every 3 to 5 years. And not only that, it's not 12 inches, now it's 16.5 inches. So we're seeing more frequent downpour events and then heavier amounts of rain when those occur. But then that rain is not going somewhere else, and those places are experiencing more dry. So in a half century, that's a snap. So
I've sat through those storms on Big Island and went home. I remember I was there for one in 2001 where we had a series of that kind of rain where we were getting 12 and 16 inches of rain. Clinton was coming through at the time, and it was very interesting to just see waterfalls form on the mountains, but knowing that it was destroying crops. It was changing the landscape. It was emptying out caverns. It was really changing in a large way how people live their lives. So I think this is a perfect place to take our first break. Fascinating discussion. I'm joined today by Jeff Mikulina, CEO of Blue Mountain Foundation, and I'm Josh Green, your host.
Aloha, namaskar, and hello. My name is Anu Hittel, and I host the show called Climate Change Beyond Outrage. We go beyond outrage to find solutions to climate problems facing people, nations, and the world. I hope you will join me here every Tuesday at 1 o'clock. We broadcast live from thinktechhawaii.com. Aloha and bye-bye.
Okay, I'm Jay Fidel, that's Ray Starling. We co-host a show called Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy, every Wednesday, 4 to 5 p.m. It's really interesting. You know, Ray has a way of unzipping these guys. He asks them these questions and all this stuff tumbles out, and we find out stuff we would never know about without Ray's questions. Thank you, Ray.
You're welcome, Jay. I'm very pleased to be your Ed McMahon every Wednesday at 4 o'clock here on the internet. So you can join us and see what's happening in the energy world, and there is a lot going on. So join us every Wednesday at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, come around, be energized, right here on Think Tech. Aloha.
Aloha. Welcome back to Healthcare in Hawaii. I'm your host, Josh Green from the Big Island. Today I'm joined by Jeff Mikulina, who I earlier said was with a different organization, Blue Mountain, because I was thinking about 5 mountains on the Big Island, but he's Blue Planet Foundation, of course, which is an organization committed to ending the use of fossil fuels really on our planet, starting here in our small Hawaii, but using us as a test bed for the best ideas, the best practices, and the best policies. He's backed with a good friend, Mr. Hank Rogers, who is an extraordinary individual, has put together a team that is super intelligent, super committed, super progressive. We talked a little bit about global warming. We talked about the Paris talks. We've talked about what could happen globally. Why don't we tone it down and bring it back to kind of a local, a local day-to-day operation. So Jeff, at Blue Planet, when you wake up, what kind of policies do you think about? What kind of things do you think about getting done day to day so that when the president tweets or the Pope talks about global warming, he can say, or she can say, hey, Hawaii can do this. This is the best thing to do. How do we get to 100% renewables?
Well, I mean, first thing in the morning,
Yes.
probably after some coffee, maybe we'll start thinking about that.
Yes.
But the policies that we really look at are what are the big levers that we can pull to clear the path for 100% renewable energy. And one comes to mind that's currently being deliberated at the legislature. And it speaks to just the fundamental, what motivates our utility to take action.
Yes.
In the past couple of weeks, we've heard unfortunate news that they want to expand coal use in Hawaii. They canceled a couple of solar projects, or 3 solar projects. It'd be 100 megawatts of clean energy at very low cost, 14 cents per kilowatt hour.
Why would they do that? Why would they cancel something like that?
They're going to have good reasons why they did, and there were some issues possibly with the financing of the companies. We don't think they're insurmountable issues, but these things come up. I mean, this is business. But we have to stay the course. I mean, this is again, our opportunity takes so long to get these projects going. These projects in particular already broke ground and they had stuff in the ground. So we hope that they get resurrected. But if you really look fundamentally, why would the utility maybe not be so motivated to do whatever it takes? And that's what we need to be doing, do whatever it takes. It's because they don't really make money on these third-party projects. They don't, add any profit on it. They buy the electricity and they pass it through to consumers.
Right.
They don't get rewarded for that. They do get rewarded for when they build power plants and build power lines. The PUC lets them recover cost and about 10% profit. Okay. So that's the motivation. And when you think about a motivation like that, what are you motivated to do then? Build systems and keep things humming and own stuff.
Right.
So there's a bill going through the legislature that would ask the Public Utilities Commission, they're already moving this direction, but really nudge them further to look at a different way to reward the utility and its shareholders. To say, it doesn't matter how much you build, it matters how you run the utility, how you perform. Are you integrating renewable energy? Are you providing customer satisfaction? Are you reducing bills? Are you being very efficient with the fossil fuel that you use? Looking at just a whole litany of metrics that they then reward the utility on.
Right.
We think once those things are aligned, we'll have a smoother path in getting to 100%.
Right. Can it be done? I mean, how do you get to 100% these days? Now, Hawaii, I see. We have so much renewable. What's the reluctance going to be in all these states that make a ton of money off of selling their coal? I grew up in Pennsylvania, right next to West Virginia. I mean, that was the culture, right? Now they're fracking, which I just plain hate, frankly, because I have the same concerns you do about earthquakes and contamination of water systems, and goodness knows what the other public health consequences are of all these reagents going into the ground. But, I mean, how do you take the profit motive out of this energy universe and turn it into essentially a humanitarian motive, which is don't destroy the planet? How do you get there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, profit motive is a good thing, and I think we can just, again, reorient and make sure that's aligned with where we want to be. I mean, people who have gone solar in Hawaii know that. I mean, many of them do it for economic reasons.
Okay.
This is a big business, renewable energy.
And it helps people because their bills are very low. I mean, a ton of my constituents on Big Island have solar systems now, and it's just amazing.
Yeah.
Their savings. Okay.
So using the market for sure.
Okay.
But the thing we have to think about too, again, I'll keep coming back to moral imperative.
Yes.
We need to make these decisions and make this shift. Yes, people are going to be transitioning from coal mining to hopefully doing smart grid or renewable energy or something else.
Right.
From what I understand of coal mining, it might not be a bad transition health-wise too.
Yeah, black lung. I can't even tell you how many. My family was intimately tied into that whole thing because we work in the steel business, which everybody in Pittsburgh did. They were engineers and architects, but so many of my relatives also spent time in the mines, also spent time in really very unsafe working conditions. And I think West Virginia and other states would be happy to get to a place where they didn't have major public health crises, major public health costs, the loss of life. I mean, the average lifespan for individuals that are exposed to, coal dust is just really low.
Yeah.
But it's a challenge, I gather. And what other state? I mean, Hawaii has been pretty successful, in large part because you guys are there, with Blue Planet, making sure people understand the way the changes need to go helps a lot. I mean, are we seeing this in other places where there's a lot of sun, other countries even? What's going on in places like Florida? I hear mixed feelings, mixed stories about Florida because of there's the next era question and all these things. What else is going on? What other states lead?
Well, states that lead, it's interesting. Oregon right now is having a discussion of do they phase out coal, and they're shooting for a 50% renewable portfolio standard. We have 100%, but 50% by 2030.
What would Oregon use?
They have a lot of hydro there, probably a lot of wind, and solar too. I mean, believe it or not, just because they're a little bit higher up.
Sure.
Germany has a whole bunch of solar, and they're at maybe 55 degrees latitude.
Sure.
But you mentioned the Sunshine State; they get a lot of sun.
Yeah.
But here's where the challenge of I'll call it inertia is in place. In Florida, they use a lot of nuclear, a lot of natural gas, and they have relatively low bills.
Right.
So that incentive to do solar is a little bit weakened. And then you have an incumbent utility that is very much in this old model that we talked about, where they generally profit from what they invest in the system that they own.
Right.
So they haven't flipped to this new model that we would like to see in Hawaii and elsewhere, where the utility becomes more of a sort of internet service provider or an Uber of electricity, where they connect the supply and the demand and they help manage that, as opposed to owning these things and producing a commodity that they then sell.
Interesting.
So Florida we haven't seen as a leader in that way, whereas other states, California is always a leader. New York is going through a very similar process that Hawaii is going through, which is looking at the utility model and thinking, is there a better way? Oregon, as we mentioned, Washington has been a leader. Believe it or not, Idaho has a high percentage of renewable energy.
I was going to ask you that. So at first, as you were describing, it sounded like a blue state, red state kind of thing, right? That places like Oregon, California, New York are following some of Hawaii's lead and doing some other things that are appropriate to their state in a progressive energy fashion, but not maybe Florida. But then you mentioned Idaho. So Idaho, why?
So Idaho, I mean, this is why we should get away from politics and just look at what resources do the state have? The state has a lot of hydro. They're not burning coal. They're using hydro. They're using their indigenous resources just as we can. I mean, it really shouldn't be a political thing. Interesting, in Texas, the conference was in Austin. As we know, Austin's that little blue dot in red Texas.
Yeah.
But this is big business. About 11% of their power last year came from wind.
Wow.
And the folks doing wind aren't hugging trees on the weekends. I mean, these are, this is business.
Yes.
Of course, it's Texas, so, one of the panels was discussing how do we do solar and wind on the top of our property and then still drill for oil and gas underneath to kind of maximize what they can do.
Right.
But just fascinating that this isn't it's crossing the lines.
That's encouraging, because I think if states look at it in those terms, in that way, that they can benefit for their economy. Because as one thing that I've learned over the years, having transitioned from being a full-time doc to a 50-50 doc/legislator, is there are major challenges. Every budget has a challenge, and there's so many important things and so many good things. You could fill a budget 3 times over with great projects, but if you don't have a good economic model, you languish. And if you don't have a model that keeps you from languishing, you never change. You never do anything because people can't take the time to have that risk. They have to pay their bills. They have to have their job growth. And so by integrating these things, by looking at what a state really could do, and perhaps getting lucky, or that we're not burning so much fossil fuel, it's very, that's very encouraging. And my guess is you're on the right track, because as these initiatives and these changes to the system sweep the nation, when they see they can be good economic drivers while at the same time being clean, I don't think any state's going to turn away from them unless there's some other ulterior motive.
Right. And I mentioned that inertia, and I think inertia is just a challenge in everything, from healthcare to making changes on energy. This is how we've been doing things. There's a whole, there's just alignment with, business and labor and jobs like coal miners or steel workers. So making that shift, it requires sometimes a Herculean, pivot to a new energy economy or a new, and getting people to break habits is just hard.
Well, I'll tell you, it can be done. And let me give you a case in point. I grew up in the 70s, and I was born in 1970 in Pittsburgh, right? In those years, Pittsburgh was a black town. Soot everywhere, steel mills everywhere. All the jobs were steel up and down the rivers that we have there, the Ohio and the Allegheny and Monongahela. It was a challenge. Most of the economy and the energy came from coal. Now, if you go to Pittsburgh, it's one of the cleanest cities in the country. It's based on technology, high tech, and healthcare. There's still need for steel globally, but it's been totally changed. So people who go to Pittsburgh wouldn't recognize it. They don't, just basically 40 some years later, it's an absolutely different world. And that is somewhat encouraging to me, because that tells me that countries can change. And I mean, just the few years I've known you, the dialogue has certainly changed. Why don't you tell us, what was it like 5 or 7 years ago talking about these issues versus today?
There's always ups and downs. I do think the overall trend is toward people being more aware, being more conscious, and wanting to take action. I think the inflection point could have occurred maybe about a decade ago. Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth was, I think, a big pivot for a lot of people as they saw that powerful documentary.
Right.
Remember the next year, 2007, you introduced the bill. You were in the House at the time. It's House Bill 222 maybe. We ended up gutting it later and putting in the greenhouse gas stuff. But
I love that.
It was an example where we took California's greenhouse gas limit, which capped our greenhouse gas emissions at a 1990 level by 2020. And had our Hawaii version and passed it that year.
I'll be forever grateful, by the way, for that sheer stroke of luck that the one bill, which was totally well-intentioned, gets replaced by the most fantastic legislation that becomes legend.
Which you were a big supporter.
Well, of course. And Mina was a star, and you were a star, and all these people that we now still watch in the industry were really added. But I just watched. It's funny. I watched the movie and thought, well, what the heck? It seems like a relevant discussion to be having in every corner of the world. But then thank God for people like you who actually have expertise in the area to get it right. So that does seem like there's been a big change.
There has. I will say, though, that looking at the polling nationwide, there seemed to be people kind of hit snooze for a while. And maybe there's some pushback. Energy prices went up. Now they're dropping again. You see people getting in larger cars. The glut of natural gas in the mainland, I think, has affected, maybe efficiency and the push towards renewables. Fortunately, technology is always changing too. I mean, where solar is today, dramatically different than it was 10 years ago. And now we're seeing something similar happen with energy storage, where that technology could really be a game changer for energy. But again, the larger arc is, I think, people becoming aware. I mean, when the Pope last year said that this was, a moral imperative, that's what, 1.1 billion Catholics globally that generally don't hear that message. And then everyone just kind of admiring that spiritual leader making a statement like that. Other religions followed. A Jewish community had a letter as well. And then But you were there all along.
Yes, I was. And I got some Catholic relatives, but I'm pretty much Jew through and through. And so I was glad to see people, jumping on board. But so to see the dialogue change, it's going to always be a process, I think, right?
Yeah.
But you're saying it was even more urgent when we were seeing gas prices at $4 a gallon.
In that way, because you had the economic driver. Yeah. I mean, it's true. People want change, but they don't want to change, and that's just the fundamental reality of human nature. But I think we'll get there. Unfortunately, it's going to take some wake-up calls, and I think we're already seeing them.
Yep.
Hurricane Sandy, for sure, was a wake-up call for many on the East Coast. These things are going to happen in our lifetime, and it's making that connection that this isn't an act of God.
Yeah.
This is actually an act of Congress sometimes, that they're not getting the policies that we need to accelerate this transition.
Yeah, how ironic. It's not an act of God, for sure, but when we get the Pope talking about it, it does kind of send that urgency.
Yeah, right.
We're going to take a break. We'll be back in a moment. I'm joined by Jeff Mikulina, who's at Blue Planet Foundation, a leader in energy work, with his team.
Aloha! How you doing? It's me, Angus McTech, wishing you to welcome and join us to see us on Hibachi Talk on Think Tech Hawaii. Join my co-hosts, Gordo the Tech Czar and Andrew the Security Guy, every Friday from 1300 to 1345. We look forward to seeing you. We'll talk tech and we'll have some wee bit of fun. And remember, let your wing gang free wherever you be. Aloha!
Hello, I'm Stephen Katz, and I'm the host of Shrink Wrap, which comes to you live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. on thinktechhawaii.com, and then it's repeated again whenever you want if you go to the website. On our show, we will be talking to all different kinds of therapists, psychologists, psychoanalysts, psychiatrists, people who talk about the mind, the brain, and about different ways to find happiness. I myself am a marriage and family therapist in practice here in Hawaii, and I hope you will join us because I've got a lot to learn, you've got a lot to learn, and it's a great ride. Thanks a lot. See you soon.
Aloha, welcome back to Healthcare in Hawaii. Today I'm joined by Jeff Mikulina, who's with Blue Planet Foundation. They are a leader in our state, really challenging us to become fossil fuel clear, and fossil fuels. Technology's been changing, the dialogue's been changing, but the goal is the same, to have the cleanest environment, to control global warming, to reverse the effects, God willing, to talk about energy as kind of the moral imperative, energy conservation and utilization of clean energy as our moral imperative for this generation. So thanks again for being here, Jeff.
Thank you.
So now let's just riff. What does Blue Planet do? What are some of the projects that are meaningful to your organization day in, day out that change Hawaii's energy use?
Our main initiatives are before the Public Utilities Commission and at the legislature. We think those are the most powerful, levers we have to really transform, the rules that we all abide by. So a lot of the stuff is kind of happening behind the scenes there, which is difficult for a nonprofit. You see Aloha United Way and Food Bank and Goodwill out there, and some of our work is kind of more wonky behind the scenes. But we think it's important to be at the table and have a counterweight to the utility or to the fossil fuel companies, talking about this alternative future and the pathway to get there. So that's a big chunk of our work, bringing in experts, doing the analysis, and bringing a different, helping shape the agenda for policy in Hawaii.
Right.
A lot of our more public-facing work is fun stuff to engage kids. We just did a student energy summit last fall with 100 kids around the state. From that, then we did an energy innovation design challenge, where teams could enter and try to solve an energy problem and build prototypes and then do a video. These are on our website. Some of the videos are great, really worth watching.
What's your website so people can?
Blueplanetfoundation.org.
Great.
So
Perfect.
check that out. Something that, one of the challenges with energy is it's invisible. People really only think about it when you're paying your bill or you're pumping gas.
But you got your iPhone and you've got your gas, and it's all there every
It's all
day,
there.
everywhere
You touch
we go.
it all the time. It's there, it's present, but you don't really engage and think about megawatts and the like. So we developed an app with Hawaiian Electric called Island Pulse. And right now it's just for Oahu, but we'd love to come to Hawaii Island.
Yes.
And it shows the real-time energy use on this island. and then the generation mix. So it breaks down to how much solar, how much wind, how much coal.
Sure.
So islandpulse.org, and you can see that. There are also some kiosks that we have in different places around town.
Right.
But we think that's important for people to kind of be aware and see, wow, this is how it changes throughout the day. Here's how solar, wow, goes up to 20% and it goes down to 0. These are the challenges that we're going to have in our future energy system. So getting people familiar with it now, we think is important.
Yeah, and I think it will help inform them of what the reality is on the ground. Because like you say, I don't think if you went and polled people out just in the community, they would know what percentage of our state uses
Coal,
solar
for
and what's
example.
coal. What is our percentage of coal still?
On this island, it's about 20%.
Wow.
And it's unfortunate. I mean, coal is the worst, when it comes to climate.
Yeah.
It's also a challenge because it kicks out mercury when you burn it.
Yeah.
And that mercury could show up in the sashimi.
It's very toxic, and it can cause birth defects without a doubt, and developmental disabilities, which are out there. And there's all these toxins that's probably a whole nother segment we could do, but I have lots and lots of concerns about heavy metals and other toxins and the rise that we've seen in developmental disability, whether it's autism or kids that are just slow or all kinds of things that we now medicate for, but it's just a disaster for families. And there are connections. I think there was a study recently that showed young families with babies that lived very close to highways where there was a lot of emission had much higher rates of developmental disabilities. And we know it's the emissions. We know it's these metals.
Yeah.
So now let's play Energy Czar, though, for you. You're the Energy Czar for today and tomorrow. What's the first thing that you do to make sure that Hawaii is a leader in renewables?
We took that first step last year, setting the vision.
Okay.
And that's so important. I mean, it's difficult to overstate that having the vision, having the endpoint, we're going to reach 100% renewable energy, because then it aligns all of our investments, it aligns our planning,
Right.
And we're all going down that path.
So no one can come into the state and if it doesn't say that we're going to move towards 100% renewable, they're just not really going to be a part of the plan.
Right, that's right. We made that decision.
Yes.
But what we haven't made the decision on is transportation, which is a big chunk of our oil use, our fossil fuel use.
I've
It's
heard that.
actually-
How much do we use?
It's probably about 40% of our overall fossil fuel mix
Wow.
goes to transportation. Last year we burned close to 500 million gallons of highway fuels, diesel and gasoline.
Right.
And it's expensive. I mean, it's relatively cheap now, but still costs us billions to
Right.
pay for gas and diesel every year.
Does that mean that we should be at 100% utilization for electric cars? I mean, is that...
Electric, hydrogen, zero emission.
Really?
What's exciting about that, though, so you asked Energy Czar,
Yes.
let's take a hard look at transportation, how we can quickly move off of gasoline. Anyone who's been in a Tesla or even a Leaf knows that electric cars are fun to drive.
Yeah.
They're real. They're no longer these golf carts that we used to think about.
Yes.
They're fully fledged, great vehicles. People usually become evangelists once they start driving them.
Right.
So, making this transition to electric vehicles or hydrogen vehicles,
Yes.
and we're seeing the first of those. The Toyota's selling a Mirai, I think, this fall or next year.
Yes.
We might see more. It's exciting to learn that JTB, people might have seen those whale buses around town. He's committed to making those zero-emission hydrogen
Wow.
buses, which will be great, I think, once, because there you have an open-air bus,
Right.
noisy, emissions. Imagine if it's quiet with zero emissions running, and the only emission is water.
Amazing.
So I think that's where we're going to transition to. But the good news is when we do this for transportation, it pairs really well with renewable energy. And this is the message that we want to get across is having an electric vehicle, you essentially have a battery on wheels. And if there's anything we need to get to 100% renewable energy, it's that battery. So we can use that battery by charging it at smart times, maybe using the battery to put energy back onto the grid, and they've tested this on Maui and in other places. So moving together with transportation and electricity will help us get there faster.
What will the train be like? What will the impact of that be? Just more cars off the roads?
Well, we hope, and that is the hope. And then we hope we can power with renewable sources too. If we're going to do it right, let's really do it right.
Have they had that discussion? I apologize, I haven't.
They have. It's there's a lot of moving pieces, and then the utility says we'll provide power, and it'll be increasingly clean. We would love to see an arrangement where they are just procuring 100% renewable, and I think people would feel better about it too if that was the case.
Wow. Okay, so you said transportation cuts a big hunk out of it. And what would you say the makeup needs to be for those who don't follow energy as closely? I mean, we've got Big Island. I've heard Big Island can be an energy producer. what percent has to be wind and what should be solar and how much should be hydropower? Do you have a good grasp for what that should be
we
like?
could guess, and we know we're going to be wrong in 5 years.
Okay.
There is a professor at University of Hawaii, Professor Matthias Fripp, who has done this modeling. And it's pretty cool. He just used today's assumptions, used the fuel forecast price, and just let his model run and pick what the different resource mix is going to be. And then really try to figure out how do we match up our supply and our demand, because that's going to be the challenge in the future. Is we can do a lot of solar,
right,
but we all know that at 8 o'clock in the evening we're not going to have that solar.
Right.
So is it going to be batteries? Is it going to be making hydrogen from water? Do we use biofuels, something else?
Yes.
So Matthias Fripp has done that work, and that's interesting to look at.
Yes.
The wild card is technology. We really don't know, what's going to be the next big thing. The story I like to tell, in 2008, when the smartest minds in the room put together the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative,
right,
they said, by 2015, we're going to have 23 megawatts of this rooftop solar on people's homes.
Right.
People thought, wow, that's 23, that's crazy. End of 2015, we had 370 megawatts. So we were off not by 10%. We were off by a factor of 15.
Right.
So we hope to see similar gains in other technologies, and then we'll have a better idea. The questions are, though, do we need to connect the islands with cables or not?
I was going to ask that question.
Should we? I think that's an open question. If storage really accelerates the way it is, maybe each island can go it alone.
Interesting.
But it's how fast we want to get there, what price we want to pay, and then the trade-offs. And the trade-offs are going to be the biggest challenge. Do we dedicate land use to solar, to growing food, to growing biofuel crops, to ecosystem? We're going to have to make those tough choices. Do we do offshore wind or not?
Interesting. So yeah, we have a lot of capacity because we have offshore wind, we have wave power, but people like to have the ocean front.
Right.
I want to be respectful to a person who wrote in. Someone mentioned that, let's see, of course, sunshine states get mentioned a lot. What about solar power in some other states like Minnesota as a primary energy source? How could that work?
It could work. In fact, we have solar down in Antarctica and in the Arctic. Minnesota, interesting case, they passed something called community renewables, something that we passed last year. And we looked at Minnesota as an example because when they unleashed their program, it was oversubscribed within a week. Wow. So there's a high demand for solar in Minnesota, of all places. And again, I point to Germany as a good example of they had policies to really promote solar, and they may still be the leader in solar. And they're, we're at 22 degrees latitude. They're at 55, and if you've been there, it's not exactly the sunshine, country.
Yeah, well, I have, and that suggests that really it's a political will question. If a country has the political will and they're willing to work out the economic models, it can be done.
Right, but I think the important thing too is what are the indigenous resources for place? Minnesota has a lot of wind too. They do that in the western part of the state. A place like Denmark, they have some solar, but they have a lot of offshore wind, and they're putting that to use. Again, hydro in Idaho, For Hawaii, we're just fortunate because our basket is full of every single resource, so we can be more, I think we can discriminate more in what we want to really use.
Right. As I think about these things, and we're going to wrap up soon, I would hope that the next president that comes in, they'll be brave enough to take this up as their #1 issue, because it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong here with this assertion, but it seems to me that this could be our Apollo project, which would be energy independence, which would have a fantastic impact on just global warming and environmental impacts. But at the same time, our energy independence could free us up politically, geopolitically, with some of the questions we have in the Middle East.
Yep.
The economies would seem to me would be able to flip in such a positive way if we had massive new amount of economic growth, whether it's here in Hawaii or on the mainland. Could this be, the next president's Apollo project? Could that happen?
Yes, and that's a perfect analogy. And what I really like about that analogy is in 1961, when President Kennedy said we're going to the moon, he didn't say we're going to go 80% of the way to the moon and then turn around.
Yeah.
I mean, he captured the public's imagination by making that audacious goal. And at the time, we didn't know how to get there.
Yes.
And that was what I think is key, is setting the vision without maybe knowing the pathway, and then developing the technology, to match that. But you're right, there's going to be all sorts of spillover effects from doing this. And it's going to take, you say brave, I think brave and leadership. Hawaii's 100% renewable energy law formed and took place. We pushed this in 2014 and it fell flat. It passed in 2015. What changed? Well, a few things changed. We had a new governor,
Yes.
we had a new CEO at the utility, and we had a new chair of the Public Utilities Commission. So leadership matters. There's some other factors that obviously made it happen, but leadership matters in this issue, and it's going to require folks who think, not for the next term, or businesses that think for the next quarter, but really have the long view, see where we want to be, and that's what history is going to remember. The folks who made those tough choices, but enabled the path to the future we want.
Yeah. Tough choices for a future that we want. Sounds like the right thing to do, though.
Sounds like a campaign slogan, kind
Yeah,
of.
it does. For Blue Planet Foundation, for sure. But I just want to say thank you so much for doing what you do.
Thank you.
For providing leadership. And I think that we'll continue to come back over the years and we'll see the successes that you've been able to help initiate. So I'm Josh Green, Healthcare in Hawaii. Today we talked with Jeff Mikulina, who's a terrific guy and a leader in the space of renewable energy. Please check out their website, blueplanetfoundation.org, to see what's going on in our state as we try to help lead the world in energy issues and matters that will help you and your health. Thanks again.